Nurses everywhere, we love you. Today, May 6th, is your National Day for Appreciation. But there is no day you aren't appreciated. You are the true warriors and heroes. Since COVID-19 slammed this world into its invisible war, you have been the trenches and in the trenches every day with heart-wrenching courage and compassion, pulling as many of the sick and dying as you could from the bizarre clutches of COVID-19. And some of you died in those trenches. Thank you, every nurse everywhere on this planet. Thank you. And I deeply pray that by next May 6th, we will have a vaccine against the terrible COVID, and that every nurse, doctor, and paramedic on this planet has all the personal protection gear and N95 masks they need forevermore to survive and win in all the battles yet to come against COVID and other invisible enemies of life. Dear nurses, feel a hug through the electrons. We love you so much, and thank you so much for everything you angels in human clothing do to help keep humanity going. While we are all worrying about the COVID pandemic, I want to show you why everyone should wear a mask these days to talk with and be around your fellow human beings.
Now I'm recording.
Stay healthy.
Great,
Stay healthy.
great. Less loud.
Stay healthy. Are you recording?
Yeah.
Stay healthy.
Louder.
Stay healthy.
Louder.
Stay healthy.
Nothing.
The insidious COVID deadly microbes spreading in those bright green drops of moisture recorded by the New England Journal of Medicine are only 1/20,000th of an inch long and only visible in electron microscopes like this image. But it isn't just the microbe world that's agitated. Back up here in the big-sized matter world, here is the face of another dangerous creature that showed up for the first time ever in the United States in Washington state early this year, about the same time that COVID also got to Washington state for the first time. Technically, this thing is called the Asian giant hornet, but lots of people call it the murder hornet because it likes to cut off honeybee heads with its big front pincers and eat the dead bodies. Washington state beekeepers have found piles of their honeybees with their heads cut off by the Asian hornets. But honeybees can turn on the hornet, surround it in a ball of their vibrating bee bodies, and heat that hornet to death. Humans who have been stung by this hornet compare the pain to a hot metal knife plunging into their skin. Well, one possible bit of good news: these hornets might not be able to handle icy cold winters in the Midwest and the East Coast of the United States. And a couple of weeks ago, in my April 15th Earthfiles YouTube broadcast, I talked about this sad headline from the Canadian Broadcasting Company, dated April 12th, 2020, quote, "Hundreds of dead seals washing ashore in Nova Scotia," close quote. One of the beach sites about 18 miles southwest from Halifax, Nova Scotia, is West Pennant, Sambro, and Fossan Cove. That is where 21-year-old Geoffrey Howard and his parents have a beach house. Their full-time residence is in Halifax. Geoffrey drew for me on this map in red ink that path he walked from Fossan Cove past Duck Cove for 1 kilometer, which is 3,280 feet. And along that red line, he was shocked and confused about seeing one dead seal after another until he had counted 27. Now, nearly a month later, I have been able to interview Geoffrey, who last month took his cell phone to record the 11 beheaded or head-damaged young seals in a line on his family's property, and found 16 more further down the beach, for a total of 27 young dead seals. I talked with Geoffrey about the mystery yesterday on May 5th, 2020.
We had 11 on our property, and then we also walked along the coastline, probably a kilometer down the coastline, and we discovered 16 more in that 1 kilometer.
So it would have been 27. It looked to me like they were sort of averaging about 20 feet apart.
Yeah, I'd say averaging, although on our property we did have a cluster where it was probably 5 or 6 within 20 feet.
27 young seals, all either beheaded or something had taken hide off of their skull or some variation.
Yeah, correct.
And that the head appeared to be the only wound on any of these pups.
Correct. Some of them had holes in the side of them, although we believe that's just from seagulls and scavengers pecking at them.
Have you ever heard of 27 young seals being beheaded or having their skull hide taken off?
Not even one headless seal. And I've lived here my whole life. What could have caused this and why now and not any other time in the past 21 years? So it was more just asking questions of experts of what possibly could have caused this. And the conclusion that we came to, which I don't know, there's no proof of it, but this seems to be the most accepted reason, is that the seals are from more northern Canada in a place called Newfoundland and Labrador. And there's lots of large icebergs and ice chunks floating around. And this particular season, there was an overpopulation of harp seals. And then when the young seals didn't know how to survive, so they'd go up to the surface to get air, and the combination of water currents and intense winds pushed the ice together and crushed the seals' heads. But at that time of year, we didn't have any large ice chunks in the ocean in this area. So the theory is that they got killed up in Newfoundland, and then strong water currents brought them to the coast of Nova Scotia.
You walked that kilometer. You saw the spread of each one approximately 20 feet apart and in some places closer.
Mm-hmm.
Anything about that walk that could match the hypothesis?
It definitely seemed improbable, and especially given the fact that it has never happened before, not even once. It still has kind of been sitting in the back of my head that it doesn't completely make sense. Yeah.
And has it stopped?
So April 10th, there was a pretty intense storm here, lots of waves and intense winds. And then the storm died off that day. And we heard our neighbor from maybe 3 kilometers down the road had alerted our other neighbor that they had over 20 dead seals on their coastline.
Did you have ice in the water?
No, it would have been too warm for ice in this area.
And so the idea of ice, it could not be explained by ice crushing their heads.
Yeah.
Has anybody in the Sambro area noticed other fresh beheadings, let's say in the last 2 weeks?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Your kilometer is not the total universe of these beheaded seals. There were more. No. There were others.
Yeah, many more. Like altogether, I've probably seen in Sambro over 50. And a lot of the coastline along here isn't very accessible, so I would imagine there's hundreds, if not thousands.
If anyone in the audience tonight has any more information about the strangely beheaded or head-damaged seals on the North Atlantic Ocean beaches of Nova Scotia, Labrador, or Newfoundland, please email me at earthfiles@earthfiles.com. Just always think of a reporter who files news about the Earth. So it's earthfiles@earthfiles.com. And there is also news about more unexpected and strange symptoms in COVID-19 patients, but this time it's children. First reported in the UK, Italy, and Spain, and now recently in the United States. Doctors are calling it an inflammatory syndrome provoked by COVID-19 that can hurt the heart, intestines, and other organs in babies to teenagers. But medical experts do not understand exactly what the relationship is between the COVID coronavirus and the life-threatening symptoms. In England at the end of April, Health Secretary Matt Hancock announced that some children had died in England without any underlying health problems. Babies have arrived at hospitals with high fevers and swollen arteries. And doctors in Italy have reported a large number of children under age 9 with severe cases of what are being diagnosed as Kawasaki-like disease common in Asia, which would be a strong immune response and appears to be provoked by COVID-19 infections that causes inflammation of blood vessels, especially the coronary arteries of the heart. Until this new syndrome, the Asian Kawasaki disease, has been considered very rare in the United States, but it is a serious disease because it can lead to serious heart conditions such as coronary aneurysms and strokes. The New York Times today on May 6, 2020, interviewed Dr. James Schneider. He's chief of the Cohen Children's Pediatric Critical Care in Queens, New York. And he said, quote, "This is really only a disease that has been clear to us for 2 weeks now. So there is so much we are trying to learn about this," close quote. It can also be asked, why are young children now more targeted as COVID-19 evolves through the human population? And what other surprises might emerge in the second wave of the insidious coronavirus when we get to fall 2020 and COVID-19 will be circulating with the flu viruses? Godspeed to all the brilliant medical minds now trying to develop one or more vaccines. We humans need all the help we can get, from medicines to the superhuman abilities of all of the frontline workers. God bless you. Thank you forever. And now for some fun news. This past week, Peggy ran a poll to see what subject you all would most like me to do in another special in-depth report like we did with Men in Black a couple of months ago. And from the poll results that we got, they go. The number one in terms of order was Eben Yellow Book, got 21% of your votes. The second was Non-Human Nordics, got 19% of your votes. The third is the winner, Alaska Underground Pyramid. It got 43% of your votes. That's almost half. Dragonfly Drones got 6% of your votes. And DNA manipulation of evolving primates to humans got 12% of your votes. So, like we did with Men in Black, next week on May 13th, I'll do a special in-depth report with images, maps, illustrations about my investigations of the Dark Pyramid buried deep underground 60 miles west of Mount Denali in Alaska. And now, Peggy, what questions does everyone have tonight live?
We had a viewer who had asked, are there any places, to your knowledge, around the Mississippi or east of the Mississippi that have a similar legacy and power as the Skinwalker Ranch? Do you know of any places that are like that?
Well, let me address, when you use the power, the Skinwalker Ranch has been notorious, I think is a fair word to say, has been notorious in American culture and lore and the history of the Utes and the Navajo, going back for probably 300 years. And it stands out. Skinwalker Ranch and the Uinta Basin. It isn't just the ranch. What comes through the 3 centuries is the Uinta Basin. And if you think over all of the various kinds of mythologies and histories in the United States, there are Marfa lights out in the Missouri-Arkansas area. There are stones in Pennsylvania, New York, in that area, where they seem to be associated with some kind of center point for contacting other dimensions or angels. But a place like the Uinta Basin in Utah, it really is extraordinary through history. So when you ask that question, that's where my mind goes. The Uinta Basin has just about had everything. It's animal mutilations and human abductions and circles in grass and places like the Sherman Ranch, where they had interactions with what seemed to be other dimensional beings, electromagnetic interferences. Talking with Mr. Sherman, he talked with me about the night that he and his wife and kids saw little red lights come right into their house. And the red lights just drove his wife to distraction, and she screamed, and that's when he ran outside and grabbed his rifle scope and was looking out below the house to see what could possibly be the source of these red lights that came into their house. The children saw it, the wife saw it, Mr. Sherman, which meant it was objective to all of them at the same time. It wasn't something being manipulated in one mind versus other minds. And that was the night that he ran down from what he had seen in the rifle scope, which were strange yellow rectangular lights. And when he ran down, there was this craft that was hovering. And from his point of view, all of this is real world, like you can knock on wood, paper, matter. It was there. It wasn't some illusion. It wasn't a hologram. It wasn't being projected in his head. It was some kind of huge vehicle that had these rectangular windows with yellowish light, and 2, he said, they looked like male humanoids inside. And the most interesting thing about all of that was that he suddenly was hearing telepathically, as if they had taken over his language center. And what he heard was, it won't do us any good to tell him why we are here, because he would never understand. And I remember he was both despondent and depressed, but curious about what the nature of such a statement could be alluding to. And in a strange way, all of that happened around that ranch house for a while is a metaphor for everything that is in the Uinta Basin. When you go east, I know that there are places in Louisiana and other parts of our land where there are, we'll call them haunted places. John Keel had the book, Our Haunted Planet, and when he was dealing with the Mothman prophecies in Virginia, he talked about this feeling of that walking down a sidewalk while he was investigating. It seemed like it was UFOs and all kinds of strange things in the sky, and all sorts of things happened around the Mothman prophecies and that bridge collapsing. But one of the pieces that he told me, it's in his book, and we also talked about it at a conference, was what he called zones of fear. Now, you could say that Skinwalker Ranch and the Uinta Basin have been sort of like zones of ominous fear for a long, long time for Native American Indians and others. When you go to other places in Louisiana, some parts of Florida, Virginia. I've heard stories from people saying that there are places that they would hesitate to go because they feel ominous, or they feel that there is some kind of frequency that can interact. Well, that sort of is the big picture to your question, that there are places, big and small, that are around this planet that humans over sometimes centuries have had some kind of relationship and names, where it seems like high strangeness marks those geophysical areas. And I would say that the Uinta Basin in Utah is up there near the top of one of the places with a long reputation. But I don't know how we would ever get any kind of an objective qualifying comparison, because we would have to go to every high strangeness place that there was history about and start doing all kinds of physical experimentation. And there are 50 states and the provinces of Canada, and if you extended to the world, but if you stayed in the United States, you'd still be on one heck of a long and involved and in-depth and expensive investigation to compare all of the high strangeness ingredients of one place like the Uinta Basin to other places. And I guess the bottom line is be grateful that we have mystery in our lives and in our world. And it's the mysteries and trying to solve them that I think gives reason to get up in the morning and keep on going. What about another question?
Well, speaking about mysteries, somebody would like to know, do you have any info on
proof? I suppose if you took what we have in literature and books and you went to Robert Temple's The Serious Mystery about the Dogon tribe in Africa, in Mali, going back to the 1700s, 1800s when those French anthropologists first got there, and the evolution of hearing the tribe talk about the humanoids that came from the ocean with scales, even with head fish. And that is in the French anthropologists who were there investigating the Dogon tribe, and they wrote their work, and then Robert Temple did The Serious Mystery, which is a fascinating book about the fact that this tribe in Africa had information about the density of Sirius A and B, the orbital mechanics, the fact that these fish-like, scaled-like beings came from there, taught them certain things having to do with math, and then where does the mind jump from there? To the Sumerian world, and look at the fish-like beings that were also carved in stone and are still there. What is it about this fish, the fish scales, that's not reptilian, like when we think of alligators or a reptile that might be snake-like? A scaly fish, and even putting a fish head over the humanoid head, it seems to suggest that they either were wearing something that was made from scales, or as the Mali tribe said, that was at least what was reported to the French writers, they came out of the ocean. And that is where these stories about something in the alleged UFO extraterrestrial history on this planet, that the questions about mermaids have often come up. If you have the Serious Mystery in the tribe in Mali in Africa, and they have scaly beings, and you have fish-like scale beings or wearing something scaly in the Sumerian Anunnaki world. Maybe that is the explanation, that there were beings that lived, who knows, maybe in something that was underwater or structures, and they would be seen eventually by standing up Homo sapiens, and they would be called part human and part fish. And then there's the literal question: since there has been so much genetic manipulation on this planet by other civilizations, and that those very words have been said to me and to others by people who have worked for the Department of Defense, for intel agencies like the DIA, CIA, NSA, and Geospatial, that you wonder, is it possible that we have history and we have interaction where we know that there have been beings and they have been underwater, but they may have been specific genetic creations for this watery planet? It's becoming clear, I think, from the exoplanet surveys that there aren't a lot of planets of which they have 2/3 deep ocean. And it may be something about this incredible Earth with all of the water and a temperature that remains viable for a variety of life forms, that all kinds of creatures have been created that are now gone, but somehow they crept into the mythologies that have reached us today. Another one was, there was a man who worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he was talking about how this planet has been used as like a genetic laboratory by more than one species. And he said, I know this is hard to believe, but Linda, they actually did do genetic experiments, and there was a centaur, half man, half horse. There have been unicorns. There were dragons. And he went through what today in the 21st century, I think that most people sort of put all of that into creative mythology. And he said it's not mythology. It is another aspect of a planet that has the ingredients for being a laboratory, and laboratories are used for experimentation and the manipulation of genetic sequences on this planet has been done by competing civilizations, and he's the one who said it was for at least 270 million years. So within all of that, a mermaid, part humanoid, part amphibian or marine life, it's not a stretch. But I would like, and I'm sure you would like to have the hard proof. That's what we all need. It's not disclosure. That happened in 1947, July 8th, on the front page of the Roswell Daily Record. That was disclosure. What we have needed ever since and to this day is confirmation by the governments of this world and an assertion that the political structure doesn't have a right to keep something as fundamentally important from the whole of humanity, as we're not alone in this universe. And you, I, everybody deserves to know what the so-called leadership of this planet knows or thinks it knows. So that's where we are today. We're waiting for confirmation. Open this up for confirmation. And maybe somebody will go to Suitland, Maryland, where there are acres and acres and acres of files of the intelligence community. And maybe there's a whole file in there on mermaids. How about another question?
Hi, Linda. First, I'd like to say that Laura is in the chat and just wanted to mention that Hannah loved hearing about the mermaids.
Oh, Hannah, hi. It's Mom. I love you. Ask Laura, is she jumping up and down? Mom, can you hear me? She does that.
Well, Laura had actually said that she was yelling, Mom, thank you for the mermaids.
Oh, I love you, Hannah. I love you, Laura. I love you, John. I love you, Tata and Coco. They have a white cat named Tata that is like the mirror image of my Fluffy, and they have a Himalayan Coco that is the mirror image of her brother, my Chocolate. And it is really something. It's like we have stereo Philadelphia and Albuquerque, 4 cats that each pair looks like the other pair. Thank you, Laura.
I have a question from a viewer who would love to know, do you see a gathering of world leaders congregating in Antarctica again, like they did before the 2016 U.S. election?
I've been getting a lot of questions, and I wonder what's going on about what happened in 2016 and why did people go to Antarctica. Now, I only know publicly that John Kerry, Secretary of State, went there under the guise of an environmental make the world aware that Antarctica is melting and we're dealing with global warming. That the head of the Greek diocese went there, and that was supposed to be for something else. And the most fascinating of that year was in December. And that was the tweet that did get out on television news from Buzz Aldrin, said Buzz Aldrin's tweet. And that is the one that had the photograph of the steep pyramid of stone, like a mountaintop that looked like a pyramid. And it said in one sentence, I have seen the face, we are all in danger. I've seen the face of evil. And within 24 hours, that tweet was taken down. Fortunately, a lot of people had copied it, myself included. I had put it down on my desktop, which is something I recommend. When you see something, get it down on your desktop as fast as possible because so many things disappear these days. And the very next day or so, it was replaced by some mundane, no, it was a joke. I don't think it was a joke. But then the issue is, why did those 3 men go? Why was Buzz Aldrin, we would never have known if he wasn't being medevaced out. That was the big story around his sending out that tweet, that he had become dangerously ill of something that was never defined and that he was medevaced out. And to my knowledge, there have been buzzes around the story trying to change it or deny it or whatever. But I don't know what happened with John Kerry and the Greek diocese leader and Buzz Aldrin between, I think Kerry was there like around June, and I think the diocese guy was there like in August or something, and then became Buzz Aldrin. So it was not, to my knowledge anyway, it wasn't a group. It wasn't like a series of important political people, and the most interesting being Buzz Aldrin. And the thing about this, it's like they want to have their cake and eat it too. The astronauts, I think every single one of them, had some experience, if they went to the moon, I'm talking about, they had some experience, they had some briefing, they already had inside knowledge. There is no question in my mind. It is a hard fact. The Apollo program, they knew that there were other presences on the moon, on the backside of the moon, and that there was a base, or is a base, on the inside of the moon that was not built by humans. Is it still controlled and operated by something else? You can't get a straight answer on that either. So, Antarctica. If Antarctica and the huge architecture that I feature in my documentary, Antarctica, Alien Secrets Beneath the Ice, with Spartan 1 and Spartan 2, if the structures are huge, 80-foot ceilings, 62 acres, operate with energy that has lasted for millions of years, and if the timeline is that it was built at some point after it got to the South Pole, that's not even known. Would all these structures have been built during that period of time when it was coming off of Pangaea, what would be the southern tip of South Africa, and taking all of those nearly 100 million years to slowly come down to the South Pole? There could have been all kinds of comings and goings from other intelligences using this planet during that period of time, and unless they left some proof or some architecture, we would never know. We would absolutely have no idea who or what had been here 1 billion years ago, 2 billion years ago, that would come and leave. Except in this case, according to military people, and not just Spartan 1, there is this huge architecture, and that it's under 2-mile areas in East Antarctica ice underneath. And when Spartan 1 asked me, do you know when was the last time that Antarctica was completely free of ice, that structures this big could be built? And I've talked about this before. If you go and start reading, you will find there is a kind of consensus that up till 34 million years ago, that whole long trip from Pangaea and the continents breaking up, coming down from the southern tip of what we know as Africa and coming down, it was tropical, warm. There were dinosaurs during a period of time. They have found now cold water frogs that lived in this hot climate that was Antarctica. And you come up to 34 million years ago, and it is not clear what happened. But by 33 million years ago, everybody agrees. That is when ice began to build up on Antarctica. 33 million years ago. Built up to 2 miles, fast. So if huge structures were built, logic says they would have been built before all of this ice buildup in the 33rd million years ago. It was still warm in 34 million, but that's the last when they talk about this timeline. And 34 million years, if the structures are 34 million years old, what human anywhere on this planet has the right to keep it a secret that underneath the deep East Antarctic ice, there are huge structures with symbols and runes and hieroglyphs and technology that still functions, and possibly an actual portal that goes between here and somewhere else. And if we know all of that, the we being the classified, above top secret, only need to know, and we are never to know, how did we get to such a point on this planet where the vast majority of standing up humanoids have no right to know something as important as we are not alone in this universe, we never have been, that the planet we're on has been used by many, many different civilizations, and that we ourselves are a genetically manipulated creation by something out there that may be humanoid, that we would look at ourselves in them. And maybe they even love us in some strange way, or we wouldn't be alive. I would really like to see the face and even telepathically hear the mind of somebody who was responsible for all this. Peggy, was that you?
That was not me calling.
Oh, I don't know what happened. Anyway, what about another question?
Before I get carried away, I'd love to say some thank yous to the Super Chat donations tonight.
Yes.
So thank you, Moonbird and Lewis, Johan, Jay, JB, John, Francesco, Minnesota Folk, Carrie, Ron, Mary, Stephanie, Terry, Mike, Christina, and Isabella. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
I kind of have a two questions. They were so similar. I thought we could roll them into one.
Okay.
One viewer asked, "Have you ever thought of hitting the road and traveling to do some investigative reporting?" And I'd love to roll that in with, once we're allowed out of our homes, where would you go first if you were allowed to leave to investigate a new report?
You haven't read my bio. It's at Earthfiles. You just click on my bio. Since I was a teenager, I have traveled. I have literally traveled around this world in both hemispheres. I've been in something like 40 countries. So that your question puzzles me. I have everything, all my books, my documentaries. They are not done coved up in a desk. That was from walking and living and investigating, and sometimes being afraid under a dark sky, and sometimes being on a horse in Peru that was going up a path that was only about 24 inches wide, and it was straight down, and I had no idea that I was going to end up on a horse on such a narrow path looking straight down to a river. And people were passing the horses to go up to the Corridi Festival, and suddenly somebody fell and the horses lurched, and I looked down, and I'm looking straight down, I don't know how many thousand feet, and it was like this thought went through my mind. This is it. This is how I'm going to leave this earth. I'm going to die right here. And that's exactly what I'm thinking. And the only thing I can remember right now, and I can feel, I grabbed with my hands, I let go of the reins, and I grabbed my hands inside of the horse's hair, and I pulled the horse's hair like this to me, because as far as I'm concerned, we're going, but I'm going to hang on to his back. And then I felt this enormous energy. I don't know what the horse did. I don't even know how it did it. But with me hanging into its mane, it and we kept on going. And I tell that because it jumped into my head as being one of those moments in a life where I have not lived life through books. I have written books, but I have not lived life through books. I've actually tried to go to as many places as I could to investigate as many mysteries. And for those of you who are subscribers to Earthfiles.com, you know that in my Real X-Files section, I've been doing since 2019. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reports. And that those are all about things that I have been doing the last 20 years, going out to explore various high strangeness. And I would hope that all of you will begin to understand, because Peggy and Eric and I and Brad, we've talked about that one of the things I would like to do more of is I'm doing the Wednesday nights, and I love doing these live streams with you. And then I'm going to take as many reports as I can from this on the weekend after we've done the live show, and bring them also to life with illustrations, maps, and various kinds of graphics into Earthfiles, so that what happens here also goes into Earthfiles.com. Because right now, Earthfiles.com, my news website since 1999, it has about 2,000 reports in it. And the Real X-Files, when I start going through the Real X-Files, I realize that just the titles alone are like reflecting back the complexity, the depth, the challenge of trying to understand any kind of a phenomena like this that can be, you think, maybe something that is our ally one day. And then the next day, you're wondering, what kind of enemy are we up against? And then another day, we don't understand this at all. And then 20 years later, it isn't just we don't understand this. Fundamentally, I really do feel this day of May 6, 2020, that we are in a universe that is actually not quite comprehensible. And that every day more and more papers having to do with, could it be a hologram, all kinds of questions about, is it this old, this young? What is it about our universe? Right now, it's got, physicists are saying that there are pieces of fundamental theory that may have to be thrown out the window. Where are we, really? What is this matter universe that at least some physicists say, right at the moment of however a universe begins, this could have gone antimatter. And it went matter. And that what threw it this way is so strangely knife edge that it's maybe the biggest mystery of all, truly. And when you get into this work that I have been trying to do for so long, that started with who and what do the mutilations that are bloodless and trackless around the world. And then law enforcement says the perpetrators are creatures from outer space. And then people living on ranches contact you and say, a red light came into my room and I lost time. And then you're into the abduction or the experiencer world. And then the rancher calls you up and says, there's a circle, a series of circles in my back of my ranch where we had the mutilation. And you start getting into what physics you can apply to energy systems that can make patterns in certain levels of hay and wheat and rye and barley. And then come the crop formations. And the crop formations seem to be, doesn't matter whether some people made them. There was a period of time from the 70s up to around 1992 to 93 when there was true magic in the Vale of Pewsey in England, and I was there every year for about 10 or 12 years. And the patterns themselves, you would begin to start getting into dialogues. The specific geometries might be embedded mathematical language, that there would be intelligences who would not come to Earth or be working from another dimension that would put A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. They're not going to do that. And that their minds may work in geometric patterns. And in fact, in Whitley's, Strieber's new book, I recommend, A New World, which he has the title from Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso saying to both of us at the July 4th, 1997 50th anniversary of the crashes in Roswell, that Philip J. Corso said to me when he shook my hand, Linda, I want to know, how did you get so much classified information in your book? And it started out as a joke, but I began to realize he really did know a lot. And he autographed when his book, the day after Roswell came out, and he said to Linda, "It's a new world coming, if you can take it." Well, that sentence is what he said to Whitley and me and to others about communication with a non-human that he encountered at White Sands. And a new world coming. This idea that Whitley put in the book, that we could be dealing with intelligences that they don't see the apple with the stem on the table. They see the entire proton, neutron, atom assembly of the molecular structure of what we see as the end result in the matter world. And when you start thinking about that, and you think about crop formations as a mathematical language, and you think about the mysteries in which people have been in military or science or medicine, and they've had some kind of an interaction, and they've had the language center of their brain taken over, and they see equations, they see fractal geometries. That's what they see. They don't see files, type, carved letters. They see a more refined, evolved, and profound underpinning. Fractals, in many ways, I think, are a key to, we'll call it the rhythm and structure of the cosmos. But we still have astrophysicists who don't understand. Was there even a singularity? Was there even a singularity? If there was no singularity, which is the so-called Big Bang, I did an interview with Roger Penrose, and he said, no, there was no singularity. No, everything is a cycle. It just keeps on, it's infinite cycles. And the mind goes, but there must have been a beginning of the first cycle. And that's probably a trait of being a Homo sapien. Everything we do has a beginning and an end because we're born and then we die, which may be that Roger Penrose gets it both ways. Yes, there are beginnings and endings, but if we are truly souls that have been evolving through infinity in and out of a variety of containers, in the end it may be that there was no beginning. But you have to start somewhere. So the singularity, which is now even being argued about, may or may not have happened. But somehow, we're in a matter universe. With COVID, and human beings right now that are smart enough, it's tough enough, determined enough to come up with a vaccine that will kill this COVID or at least restrain it or put it down. And you know, that really gives me a feeling of some kind of joy at this time when COVID has turned everything upside down and backwards, and it seems so horrible, and yet, we could come out of this better and stronger and going further, and who knows, they're doing all of the back channel stuff to get a place where we'll have a base on the moon publicly, and we'll have a base on Mars publicly, no matter what else they've got up there already. And in a funny, strange way, we may come out finally of the horrible COVID, like, to already finally getting into outer space in our own solar system. There's a lot of cross currents going on right now. So, Peggy, I think what I'll do is I'll try one more question and I will try to answer as fast as possible. And I love those of you who say, just keep evolving what it is you're thinking, but I know that people would like to move Q&A and I'll try to do it faster.
Okay, we've got a great one for the last question. Did you know from the first instance of animal mutilation that you investigated that something was amiss, or was it the pattern that sent you on the path to a strange harvest?
The first knock on my consciousness was my brother. It was the fall of 1976. I was in Boston doing all the medical programming for the ABC station in Boston. My husband was at Harvard. I was writing a medical script for a medical TV show one night late, like 10, 11 o'clock, and the phone rang, and I picked it up, and it was my brother's voice. He didn't even say hi or anything. But I knew that he was stationed at Moulton Air Force Base in the Air Force. Linda, a UFO has set down on the base. And that's exactly. Now, in 1976, my interest was 100% in science and medicine. I was living in hospitals and Mass General and Children's and everything in Boston doing TV shows. And my brother that night told me this story about this huge 300-foot diameter light that set down over one of the missile silos. He had orders to take people in a helicopter. Jets were flown. The sabotage alert team was reporting that this thing could blink out. They knew it hadn't gone anywhere. It had to be there, but it went invisible. The jets would pull back. Then they would hear from the sabotage alert team that the lights had come back on. It went up, the Dopplered off at 200,000 feet. And that was the beginning of hearing all of this from my brother in the Air Force at Moulton Air Force Base, when I had no exposure whatsoever to animal mutilations, UFOs, ETs, or anything, having no idea that in 3 years I would be director of special projects at the CBS station in Denver, because my husband, getting his degree in Harvard, would be going to work in cable TV in Denver for Time Inc. But in those 3 years, what happened was my brother in the Air Force was asked to take a helicopter out to an area where what? Mutilations. And he told me, he said, we're having these strange bloodless animals and they're often in circles of grass. And he had to go out in a helicopter and see how far down they would go and how fast the propeller had to go for the grass to go down and stay in these circles. And all of that was like prologue. It still didn't have any personal meaning. But it was my brother. And then when I sat with my crew working on another documentary in the late summer of 1979, and my excellent audio guy who worked Hollywood all the time, and he had a family in Denver, and when he was there, we would work on projects. He was excellent. He said that he had just come off the shoot at 2020, and that they were trying to find out why there were a lot of animals that were being found dead in the Midwest with no tracks around them and no blood, and that they couldn't keep any of their battery belts charged when they tried to go forward as an ABC network hired crew, and it was driving the men nuts. Why wouldn't their battery belts keep going? Because you can't run a camera if you don't have your battery belts charged. And if something is draining or interfering in the magnetic fields, that might explain it, but it was a problem. That is what got my attention. The fact that the crew working for 2020 out of New York could not keep their battery belts charged, that really caught my attention, and that was from that lunch. And the rest was that summer, after that lunch and being exposed to that question, here come Denver Post and Rocky Mountain News headlines. The return of animal mutilations out in the prairie. And all of these pieces all came into an intersection with me coming from Boston and all of that medical programming, and I wanted to get the answer. I wanted to know. And every step of the way, producing a strange harvest, I wanted to run it through science, through medicine, and that is why I did so much work on excisions, soil, going to see scientists, and that is still my bias. So my brother started the UFO connection, ironically. And it was Sheriff Tex Graves who put the bookend on when I was talking with him, and he was showing me all of the Polaroids he had taken, and he said, Linda, the perpetrators of these bloodless, trackless animal mutilations are creatures from outer space. Every single thing that I then encountered, 9 months, 18-hour days, not a single break, to produce a strange harvest. There was not one question in my mind when that broadcast on May 25th, 1980, for the first time, not one question in my mind. Animal mutilations, the ones that I investigated, are the work of something that law enforcement knew from the early 1960s onward, that they were dealing with beam technologies, something that could excise tissue, no blood, completely dry, no carbon under a microscope, leaving the question, who, what, and why? But definitely not predators, not disease, and definitely not satanic cults who work in blood. So I want to close out tonight by asking all of you a question. It has been at least 3 months since I have been able to go and even get a haircut. And my hair is the longest it has been in I don't know how long. And I'm curious if it looks terrible or weird. It's COVID. It's COVID long hair. And I don't know how much longer. There's nobody going to be open here, I don't think, until the end of May. I'm just curious, how many of you think this is weird to have this long hair? And I don't know, maybe it'll just keep getting longer and longer and longer, and I'll start to look like Cher. But I just would be curious because there's nothing I can do about it. I'm not going to try to cut my own hair, and I don't want to have to go someplace. So thank you. Thank you. I love you guys. And next week, we're going to go a deep dive down into that dark pyramid. I swear it's there. It's deep underground in Alaska, and it's part of a much, much, much bigger story. And to all of you tonight, if you could reach out to just 2 people and say, subscribe to the Earthfiles YouTube broadcast, if all of you, just 2 people, we could break and get to that 150,000, and I can have the bottles of champagne lined up. You guys, you line up your champagne. We will lift glasses in this strange, also COVID where we're always apart, but nevertheless, we can still do joy and we can still drink the champagne. And then, I'm not kidding, we get to 150,000. I am willing to stay up for 2 hours with Brad and Peggy and Eric and all of you, and I will have the energy and the joy to take all of your questions more, and we'll do it for 2 hours as a celebration at the kind of bookend, maybe, that we don't have to be down because of the damn COVID. So let's do this. Let's get to 150,000, and next week we'll do a deep dive into the Dark Pyramid in Alaska. I love you, and nurses everywhere, my God, you are angels. Thank you.